She spent years erasing her mother from her story, but when her perfect world crumbled, only that woman could teach her how to survive. Akosua didn't just live in Silver Heights, she curated her life there. Her apartment was a sleek composition of minimalist furniture, soft lighting, and carefully chosen wall art that whispered quiet affluence. Every shelf looked like it belonged in a luxury magazine. She wore tailored blazers, spoke with soft confidence of someone who spent time abroad, and carried herself like a woman untouched by hardship. To her colleagues at Apex Continental Bank, she was the kind of professional they all wanted to be. Precise, articulate, and untouchably polished. Nobody knew where she came from, and that was by design. If they asked about her background, she offered practiced replies. My mother lives on the outskirts of town. My mother is retired now. Vague, harmless, forgettable. In truth, her mother, Mama Ama, still rose before dawn every day in a withered two-room home in Adumfi, a modest neighborhood near the sprawling Odunfo market. By 4 a.m., Mama Ama was lighting her coal stove, steaming rice, and grinding pepper sauce with the same rhythmic care she had for over 2 decades. By 5:30, she was already wheeling her heavy food trolley through the alleys of the market to Store 44, the spot she had defended, fought for, and built from scratch. Mama Ama wasn't just a food vendor, she was a force. She ran her stall like a commander on battlefield, backing out orders to delivery boys, extending credit to trusted customers, negotiating bulk purchases with fishmongers, and maintaining a mental ledger so sharp even calculators would sweat. Odomfo market vendors knew her by name. Customers lined up for her wake and spicy grilled tilapia. But for all her impact, her daughter never mentioned her. After her husband died when Akosua was 9, Mama Ama had raised her alone, pouring her soul, every penny, into her daughter's education, from Adomfie Primary to a scholarship at Bright Steps College, to a university degree and then a master's in Cape Town. Akosua had climbed the ladder rung by rung, and with each step, the market felt farther away. Now 29, she was a senior executive in one of Yaniba's top international banks. Her office was on the 15th floor of a glass tower in central Asimara. Her days were filled with meetings, reports, and presentations. Her nights with networking dinners and curated social media posts. She was careful about her image. Her LinkedIn was spotless. Her Instagram was curated but modest. No excesses, just enough to look accomplished. She hadn't brought anyone home in years, not even Kwame. Kwame was her boyfriend, a sharp, smooth-talking investment strategist from a wealthy family in Abontema. He was charming and upwardly mobile, the kind of man who knew what wines to order and what words to use in a boardroom. But he had never met Mama Ama. Akoso had made sure of that. My mom is very private, she would say. Traditional, she doesn't like company. He never pressed. He liked the way she fit into his world. And as long as she dressed the part, spoke the part, and hosted dinner parties like the part, there was no reason to pry. Then came the invitation. The African Banking Futures Conference was coming to Asimara, and Akosua had been selected as one of the keynote speakers. She would be presenting on financial inclusion in informal economies, a topic she had worked on for months. It was the kind of opportunity that reshaped careers. Her boss praised her in front of the executive floor. This is your stage, Akosua. You are not just speaking for the bank, you are representing the future of finance in Yaniba. She smiled, nodded gracefully, and thanked him. But later that evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, an email notification popped up. A post-conference mixer would be hosted at the prestigious Lumora Towers rooftop. Spouses and close family welcomed. It read, "We encourage our presenters to invite loved ones to share in this proud moment." Akosua's stomach tightened. The next day, at work, the other presenters were already discussing their plus ones. One woman joked about her father, another was bringing her husband and twin daughters. At lunch, Kwame turned to her and said, "So, I guess I will finally meet your family, eh? Your mom will be there, right?" She hesitated. "I don't think she will come." "Why not?" "She's not the type that comes to things like that," Akosua said quickly. "She gets anxious in formal settings." He nodded. Just the curiosity lingered in his eyes. That night, Akosua stared at her laptop. The slides for her presentation opened before her. Charts about unbanked populations, case studies on informal traders, bullet points about empowering underserved communities. She was writing about people like her mother, about women who ran micro business with no loans, no safety nets, and still outperformed some formal SMEs. But he hadn't called Mama Ama in 3 weeks. In the early dark of morning, while Asemara's skyline was still glimmered with office lights left on overnight, Mama Ama stirred a pot of beans and rice, humming an old Ewe lullaby. She didn't know her daughter would be speaking to the most powerful bankers on the continent. She only knew Akosua hadn't called, but she prayed for her anyway, like she did every day. And in a high-rise not far from the market she never spoke of, Akosua rehearsed the line. "We must remember that informal doesn't mean unstructured. It means underdeserved. But with the right support, these businesses run by hardworking women can thrive." And even as she said it, shame knotted it in her chest. The days leading up to the conference felt like walking on cracking glass. Akosua smiled at the office, presented confidently in meetings, even flirted with Kwame over late dinners. But something inside her had shifted. It was as if the lie or the omission she had lived with for so long had grown too big to hide. Every casual conversation about the upcoming event brought fresh waves of anxiety. At work, her star continued to rise. Her presentation was being reviewed by the regional director. She was praised for her slides, her clarity, her poise. But each time someone said, "We are proud of your story," Akosua felt a hollow ache. They didn't know her story. Not really. They only knew the version she allowed, the polished mask. Her phone buzzed during one of these reviews. Mama Ama was calling. She let it ring, then again during lunch. She put her phone face down. She told herself she was too busy, that she would call later. But days turned into a week, then two. She avoided the market entirely, taking the long route back home to bypass Adomfie. Each missed call added another stone to the quiet guilt building in her chest. Meanwhile, in Odomfo market, the readings of survival and success continued. Mama Ama was expanding. She had taken over the small space next to us after the previous vendor retired. Now, she sold fried yam and garden egg stew alongside her signature wake and kelewele. Her name had become a local institution. Customers ordered in bulk for offices and events. Some younger vendors even asked to train under her. But Mama Ama never let it get to her head. She worked hard, paid her dues, and reinvested wisely. She ran her store like a CFO. She extended credit to long-time customers, single mothers, teachers, apprentices, never writing anything down, but always remembering who owed what. She rotated her menu to fit market trends. She brought ingredients in bulk when prices dipped and stored them for lean months. She knew when rain would drop foot traffic and when harvest season would affect fish prices. She paid her suppliers on time, and in a corner of her home, she kept a logged box with careful savings and handwritten logs that rivaled any banking software. Her best friend, Auntie Efua, often joked, "Hama, if the bank people come here, they would kneel before you." My mama would laugh and say, "But they never come. They write about us, they study us, but they don't really come." That irony deepened one Thursday afternoon at Odomfo Market. A younger vendor came rushing over to Mama Ama's store, phone in hand. "Mama, come and see oh. Your daughter is on the City News channel. She's talking about market women." Mama Ama wiped her hands on her clothes and leaned over the phone screen. There was Akosua, standing at a podium, her voice crisp, her tone authoritative. "We often ignore the informal sector. forgetting that it holds the key to our economic resilience. Market women, food vendors, roadside mechanics, they operate complex financial systems daily. Our goal must be able to create banking tools that reflect how they actually live and work. Mama Ama's eyes swelled up, pride swelling in her chest. But just as quickly, a small pang of sadness flickered. She waited, thinking Akosua might mention her name or even say, "My mother is one of them." But the segment ended. Her daughter was polished, precise, professional, yet distant. She said nothing to the others, just smiled, returned the phone and stared at Stew. In the heart of Silver Heights, Akosua sat in her luxury apartment, reading glowing reviews of her talk. Emails poured in from consultants, development partners, and NGO reps who wanted to collaborate. Her supervisor called her to commend her. "You made us proud. Akosua, your voice is authentic." But it didn't feel that way. That night, she stood in her mirror and repeated her opening line. "The informal sector deserves real support." She stared at herself, a woman too ashamed to admit that her mother still sold fried yam on plastic stools. Kwame noticed the shift. "You have been distant lately," he said over dinner. "Is it the pressure from the conference?" Akosua smiled tightly. "Just tired. It's been a lot." He reached across the table and held her hand. "Maybe we should take a trip after it is over. You need a break. I'll plan something, just you and me." She nodded, grateful for the gesture, but her mind wandered. Could she continue this relationship without ever confronting the truth? Could she keep living this double life? One Sunday, while cleaning out her emails, Akosua came across an old draft she had written in grad school, a case study proposal titled "My Mother the Economist." It had been a tribute, a deeply personal essay exploring how her mother's food store taught her about entrepreneurship, finance, and customer loyalty. She had never submitted it. Too vulnerable, too real. Now, years later, she read it again. The rawness stung. The truth of it broke something open inside her. She opened her phone and scrolled through old photos of the market. A selfie with Mama Ama from years ago. Both of them grinning with flour on their faces. Another of her mother serving a long queue of customers. She closed her eyes. The presentation had gone well, but she felt like a fraud. The storm didn't announce itself. It swept in quietly, like a crack beneath marble, barely noticeable at first, until the whole structure started to crumble. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. A local business paper headline screamed, "Scandal at Apex Continental Bank. Internal probe uncovers major irregularities." At first, it felt distant. Akosua read the article on her way to work and shook her head in disbelief. A few executives were mentioned, none she worked with directly. She assumed it would blow over, another industry shakeup that wouldn't touch her. By midday, her office was buzzing. Senior managers were whispering behind glass doors. Legal teams were holding emergency meetings. An email arrived at noon informing staff that regulators had frozen internal investment portfolios pending investigations. Her hands went cold. Akosua's savings were tied up in those portfolios. Most of her bonuses, some of her salary, all packed in Apex Executive Growth Scheme, the very product he once helped pitch to new hires. Still, she told herself, it is temporary, they will sort it out. I have done nothing wrong. The next day, her badge didn't open the executive elevator. The same afternoon, she was called into HR. We regret to inform you, they began. She didn't hear the rest clearly. Something about external audit reviews, a department being dissolved, pending investigations, public image management. The words blurred together. She walked out with a white envelope in her hand and a tight smile on her face. By Friday, she was unemployed. At first, she tried holding the pieces together. She told Kwame it was just corporate restructuring. She reassured him it would pass. She wore her old blazers and went out as if nothing had changed. But the weeks dragged on. Job applications were unanswered. recruitment firms offered silence or rejections. Her savings remained inaccessible. Her landlord, once accommodating, started sending polite but firm reminders about late rent. Then the car company called. Her payments were overdue. The apartment followed, a final notice posted on her door with a cold precision. Kwame grew distant. His replies became short. Calls were missed. He stopped dropping by. One evening, she checked the social media and saw a picture of him at a rooftop party with someone else. She stared at the screen for a long time. No job, no money, no man, no options. The day she returned to Adomfie was the day her pride died. She arrived with nothing but 2 suitcases and a silent prayer that her mother would still take her in. The gate creaked as she opened it. It was smaller than she remembered. The compound was still painted with the soft peach Mama Ama had favored for years. The scent of smoked fish and ginger wafted from the kitchen. Mama Ama was rinsing fishes in a white blue basin when she saw her daughter. For a moment, they just stared. Then without a word, Mama Ama wiped her hands on her wrapper and opened her arms. Akosua collapsed into her. There were no lectures, no "I told you so." A quiet acceptance that only a mother could give. That night, Akosua sat in the corner of the living room, the same room she had left behind for so long, watching her mother stir palm oil into a steaming pot. The old radio played softly in the background. The ceiling fan wobbled with every spin. "I thought you would never come back," Mama said gently, not looking up. "I didn't think I would either," Akosua replied. Silence sat between them. Then Mama said, "You have lost weight. The city hasn't been so kind." Akosua replied bitterly, "No, it hasn't." In the weeks that followed, the reality of her fall hit harder. Gone were the days of air-conditioned offices and cappuccinos in glass cups. Now, her mornings began with the sound of the market, the horns, the yelling, the rhythmic hammer of metal on metal. Her mother left before dawn and came back past sunset, her clothes smelling of smoke, spice and sweat. Akosua stayed home at first, too ashamed to go outside, too bruised to look anyone in the eye, but eventually she had to help. It started with small things: carrying tubes, washing coolers, sweeping the front of the store. Then one day, Mama Ama handed her an apron. "I need you to take the orders today," she said. Akosua blinked. "Me?" "Yes, you. The customers are already waiting." And just like that, she became her mother's assistant. But it wasn't easy. She spilled stew, forgot orders, miscounted change. A customer stormed off when she couldn't explain the credit policy. Another complained about her attitude. "This isn't a bank," Mama said afterward, not unkindly. "Yeah, if you forget someone's child's name, they might not come back." Akosua bit her tongue. She wanted to scream. She was a senior executive, not a food hawker. She had delivered speeches on financial systems. She had been on TV. Now, she was sweating behind the cooler and the counter, taking insults from strangers. That night, she wept quietly on her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling fan and wondering how her life had twisted into this. But in her heart, a small seed of humility began to take root. And outside, Odomfo market continued to thrive, chaotic, brilliant, and entirely unaware that one of his daughters had finally come home, broken and unwilling, but home nonetheless. The apron didn't fit quite right. The name Ama's Kitchen stitched in bold red thread across the front. Akosua tied it awkwardly around her waist, fidgeting the straps like a child forced into school uniform. "You will get used to it," Mama Ama said, already stacking boiled eggs and plantain into neat rows. "Customers don't care how you look, they care how you treat them." Akosua nodded, though her jaw was tight. She had stopped resisting openly, but inside, she still felt out of place. The market was a world unto itself, loud, fast, unforgiving, and she was used to calm, cool control, air-conditioned rooms, spreadsheets, and silent elevators. Now, she was learning the rhythm of roasted yam, tomato sauce refuse, and shouted greetings from across the dusty stalls. Her first week working full-time at the store was humbling. Mama Ama gave her simple tasks: fetching ingredients, wiping tables, taking orders. Akosa tried to be efficient, to streamline the process. She suggested printing out menus, labeling the shelves, reorganizing the cooler. Her mother just laughed. Try and serve that man before he faints, she said, gesturing towards a sweating taxi driver with a hungry look. Akuzua fumbled often. She forgot which regulars took extra pepper and who was allergic to groundnut oil. She overcooked rice, gave wrong change, and once negotiated so poorly with a plantain supplier that they overcharged her by nearly 30%. You are lucky I came when I did, Mama Ama muttered that evening, shaking her head as they recounted the sales. But slowly things started to shift. Akosua started to observe instead of assume. She noticed how her mother never raised her voice but still commanded respect. How customers didn't just come for food, they came to be seen, remembered, joked with. Mama Ama knew whose child had passed BECE, who had lost a relative, whose rent was due. She delivered food with comfort and with dignity. Then there was the credit system. Akoso had thought it informal, reckless, but it was brilliant. Her mother extended food on credit to dozens of customers, vendors, porters, even junior police officers. No receipts, no ledgers, just memory. A complex mental web of names, amounts, trust, and time. She owes me 6, Mama whispered, after handing a steaming bowl to a market girl. She paid 4 yesterday. She will pay the rest on Thursday. She always does. And she was right. The debt rotated like gears, almost never defaulting. Those who couldn't pay found other ways, helping clean the store, referring new customers, carrying goods. It was human credit, emotional collateral. Akosua was stunned. All her training in corporate finance, all her models and data tools, none of them could replicate this kind of trust economy. It was raw, real, alive. One afternoon, after managing the stall alone for an hour, while Mama Ama visited a sick vendor, Akosua made a mistake. A customer she didn't recognize asked for food on Mama Ama's tab. He looked honest, sounded sure. She served him. He never came back. That evening, she confessed, expecting a scolding, but Mama Ama just sighed. You trusted someone who didn't earn it. Now you won't forget his face. That's part of the learning. Akosua was quiet. Later, as they packed up, she asked, do you write any of it down? Your credit, your profit, your expenses? Mama Ama smiled. Only what is needed. I keep the rest here, she said, tapping her temple. Numbers matter, but relationships matter more. Akosua stared at her, humbled. The systems she had once dismissed as informal were deeply structured, not just on paper. Over time, she began to enjoy the work, not just because she was getting better, but because she was beginning to see what her mother had built, a true ecosystem. Mama Ama coordinated with other vendors to buy in bulk. They pooled funds for large purchases, shared cold storage space, and rotated off days to support one another's stores. When one of them fell sick, the others took turns running her store and giving her earnings. It was more than business, it was community finance, social insurance, and operations management all in one. Akosua realized her mother had done more with no degree and no office than many CEOs with MBAs. One evening, while tallying the day's sales using an old calculator with sticky buttons, Akosua spoke. "Ma'am, I didn't know it was this complex." Mama Ama looked up, eyes soft. "I know. You were too busy being ashamed of it to never ask." The words were not cruel, but they hit hard. "I am sorry," Akosua replied. Her mother nodded then said, "The word made you feel like you had to hide me. I don't blame you, but I was always proud of you, even when you stopped coming home." That night, Akosua couldn't sleep. She laid awake thinking about all the faces she had once ignored, the market women, the shoemakers, the hawkers, the same people she now laughed with, bargained with and relied on. Her mother hadn't just survived, she had built something resilient, ethical, dignified, and slowly Akosua began to see her fall from corporate grace not as punishment but as education, a curriculum she never signed up for but desperately needed. By the end of the month, she stopped wearing the apron like a costume, she wore it like an armor. Some months later, the rains had returned to Asimara, heavy and unbothered. They washed the city streets clean every afternoon. At Odomfo Market, taps flapped and vendors rolled their eyes at the sky, but business went on. Mama Ama had upgraded her store canopy and placed brick beneath the tables to keep them from the muddy floodwater. Akosua had suggested installing gutters, then designed and oversaw it herself. Now, Mama Ama's store was one of the few that stayed dry during the downpours. Customers noticed. "This your store make sense oh," one taxi driver said. "E be like bank branch now." Mama Ama chuckled. "Na my daughter dey manage am now." Akosua smiled, tied her scarf tighter and ladled hot shito into bowls. The apron no longer felt awkward, it was a uniform of purpose. Something inside her had shifted, not out of necessity, but out of clarity. She had stopped trying to fix her mother's business and started learning from it. She had given up on trying to apply complicated systems and instead started documenting what already worked. She created a simple ledger for cash tracking, digitized the credit list on a cheap tablet, and found ways to cut supply costs without disrupting relationships. But the biggest change wasn't in the store, it was in her spirit. She was no longer pretending to be someone else. When the call finally came from a local microfinance bank, a mid-sized ethics-driven organization looking for a consultant on community-level finance solutions, Akosua almost didn't return it. It had taken months to rebuild confidence, to see value in herself beyond suits and titles. But she did call back, and after a brief interview, they hired her. Not because of her former job title, but because of what she knew now, real-world economics. She brought something the boardroom hadn't taught her: wisdom from the ground. Her first project was designing a savings and credit scheme specifically made for informal traders, modeled directly after the trust and relationship systems she had seen in Odomfo Market. She started small, testing it within her mother's network. It worked. From there, she expanded. She brought the bank team to the market, not for publicity, but for listening. She made them sit with the women, hear their stories, and understand how each decision, each loan, each offering had human consequences. "We don't need to change how they work," Akosua told them. "We need to build systems that understand how they survive." Our team was skeptical at first, but when they saw how the repayment rates soared under the market's communal support structure, they began to understand. Akosua's life no longer looked like it had before. She didn't live in Silver Heights anymore. She had moved to a modest but comfortable apartment near the city center, close enough to the market, far enough to breathe. Her clothes were simpler, her friends fewer but deeper. Kwame had tried to resurface once, messaged her with a casual message, "Hey stranger." She didn't reply. One day, she brought her new partner, a thoughtful, quiet civil engineer who worked on sustainable housing, to the market. He carried the cooler while she served. Mama Ama, skeptical at first, warmed up quickly after he helped a struggling vendor fix a broken stall table. Later that week, Akosua invited a few work colleagues to lunch at the market. She didn't hide the location. She didn't offer explanations. She just said, "Come hungry." They sat on wooden benches and laughed over pepper rice and fried turkey wings. And when one of them tried to tip Mama Ama, Akosua grinned and said, "If you try that again, she will slap your hand." The team roared with laughter. It was the first time our two worlds met without conflict. That evening, after the market closed, Akosua sat beside her mother on the front step, watching dusk settle like dust. "You have changed," Mama Ama said, sipping from a calabash of sobolo. "I have finally become your daughter," Akosua replied. Mama Ama turned to her surprised. "You have always been my daughter." No, Akosua said softly. I was running from you, from this place, from all of it. But this place raised me. You raised me, and everything I am now, every good part of me, it came from here. They sat in silence, letting the weight of the words settle. Then my mama said, "You are both, city woman and market girl. You don't have to choose." And she didn't. In the months that followed, Akosua became a bridge between the two worlds. Her work helped informal traders gain access to banking tools without losing the culture of community. She built programs that respected lived experiences, that empowered without erasing. She was no longer hiding her mother, she was learning from her.